Einen wunderschönen guten Abend, meine Damen, meine Herren. Ja, es ist Dienstag, 19 Uhr. Sie sind an der richtigen Stelle, nämlich Sie sind vor Ihrem Bildschirm. Und Sie haben eine spannende Stunde vor sich. Und wir haben es wieder einmal geschafft, einen ganz besonderen Gast bei uns und bei Ihnen auf den Bildschirmen zu versammeln. We are very happy that we have as our special guest for this CRM conversation today, Vijay Sundaram from Zoho. And as we have had other opportunities already with colleagues and we have touched several topics, Vijay is with us to discuss one topic which we found extremely cool and very unique and very inspiring: transnational localism. But before we go into details, it's time to introduce Vijay and let him give an opportunity to talk about himself, the company, and how long he is with the company and in what roles. Vijay, welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thank you, Rolf, and thank you, Thomas and Marshall. I appreciate your having me join this event. Let me start with a quick introduction to myself so the audience knows who they're talking with. I'm with Zoho Corporation, and I've been here for about 6 years in a full-time role in the company. I also know the founders of the company since before they founded the company. So my association with them goes back more than 25 years. And maybe if things had worked a little differently, I might have joined them then instead of going and doing.
Why did it take you that long to join?
I had started my own company, so that's
okay. Good reason.
Let's put it that way. Fair enough.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you. So I'm the head of strategy for the company. But Zoho wears titles rather loosely. So in fact, most of us don't even have titles. And so I have a title mostly for the external world. So I get involved in many aspects of the business. So for example, I run our worldwide partner program and channel and our channels for the company. I also work on several areas of global relevance, like especially in areas of sales and marketing and so on. But the biggest thing that we do as part of senior members of the team is act as mentors in the company wherever we can. Because a company is really about building the talent that it has, right? So I often spend time with people who may have only 2 years of experience. They're probably, 25 years younger than I am, or more sometimes. And so my job sometimes is, part of it is to serve as that mentor or that sounding board. So there's a lot of informalism in my job, in addition to the formalism of, okay, you're working with the channels or with the partners. So what is it you do? So that is an integral part of how the whole company works. And it starts from the top. Even the CEO, Sridhar, can be accessed by anybody through a chat. And so they might ask him anything from job-related stuff to what should I do about marriage, if they want to ask him that. So it's that kind of informalism and mentorship that we have in the company. So I spend a fair of my time helping people that way as well.
How do you manage to overcome the possibility of fear? Because as said, you are working with people who are very young, maybe just fresh graduates.
Yeah.
And well, looking at myself, when I was that young, I was basically awed by those big shots, big wigs, those senior guys who know everything. So how do you alleviate this fear?
That is truly a brilliant question, because I have dealt with that on both sides, like you when I was young, and sometimes now as well, when I'm not even aware at times that you might be intimidating to somebody, or they don't bring an issue to you because they're afraid what you might think of how they think, and things like that, right? So I usually take a test from a third party, and ask someone else, what do you think? Or so some of it is just the informalism itself. You make yourself approachable, so people realize that you're here. You're not in an evaluative stage. I'm not your immediate manager trying to evaluate you in any way. So if they can get past that, if you help them solve a few issues, which I call people often and say, don't give me status in the meeting. I don't want the status. Give me a problem that I can help you solve, or I can help you think through to solve. Right. And so that opens up a lot of doors, because people now, they're not compelled to come to a meeting and give me status and feel they have to think of what status to give me. So I'm not even asking for status. I assume you know what you're doing in your job. So just bring to me the issue that I can help with. And so it might be some negotiation issue. It might be some escalation issue, or it might be some personal growth issue. And that's where experience matters, right? It works because the other person does not necessarily get that from their immediate supervisor. It works for me because it makes my job interesting. I have a new problem every time, so, and I have to think on my feet. So that is the test of seniority, right? You should be able to address things without planning and using a big staff. So makes it interesting for both of us.
Right. A company isn't its organizational chart. It's just a way to know where the offices are.
Yeah.
It's a very lovely perspective you are describing, such as you take away the roadblocks and you take away the challenges in a way that no longer fear is in the way, and you are helping and assisting in a way that everybody can feel a lot more comfortable and relaxed.
True. I'm not always successful because there will be people who will say, oh, he occupies this position and I don't want to talk to him. Well, I try to be successful by being younger, by being more vulnerable, if you will, by telling them, I don't know what you're talking about. Please explain to me. I don't really understand it. So then they understand you're just another person. There are plenty of things you don't know either.
Vulnerability is a strong position, such as if you know Brené Brown, which is a very famous author, and also in the TED Talks, she talks a lot about that. A strong point, or being strong by showing your vulnerability.
Yes.
You know what I wanted to say.
Yeah. Exactly.
The aspect is fantastic, such as you can get stronger by being aware that there is vulnerability, Verletzlichkeit, and that this together in a team approach makes you even easier to approach. It's a bit like you can still touch and feel the big boss, and this is what I had from the first pictures I saw from Sridhar, from the other Sridhar, from you, and from some of the others we met, Raju, and whoever we talk to. Everybody who has a friendly word, has a friendly smile, and is loving what he is doing. And this is charismatic for the company. This is a strong asset. Yeah.
Thank you. You're indeed right. You're indeed right. Yeah. At the end of the day, you have to enjoy what you do, and you have to be there for the right reason. And things like mentoring somebody, helping someone out, distributing your knowledge, building up the next generation of people, those are highly motivating. They're highly motivating because even outside a job, it gives you a reason to see, why am I doing this, right? And if I have an impact on somebody else and grow somebody else, we all do it with our children, but we can do more. Why not? Maybe your children stop listening to you, but maybe others will. So you have...
What's a very valid point. Yeah. Tom,
what's the philosophy behind it? I mean, it's at the end of the day, a corporation, a business is, let me call it a conglomerate of people who are working towards, well, ideally one objective, ideally. So the better you get there, well, the easier it is for the whole. Yeah? But what is the philosophy behind, well, the Zoho philosophy behind it? I mean, there's a Daimler, an SAP, a Salesforce, bunches of philosophies. But what's yours?
Yeah, there is an undercurrent of a fundamental purpose, right? So there's the fundamental purpose. If I were to distill it, it's not just this one thing, but probably at the core of what we do is to create opportunities for people who might not have had it, and use that in a productive way to actually solve real problems of people, right? So you can create opportunities in doing stuff. So in other words, you allow the market competitiveness to determine your success. But so you have an external measure of success, but your whole core philosophy is, I'm going to build people and talent and knowledge that did not exist before me. There was a void. I came in, and a lot of this fits in the context of where we started in India too, right? Because you didn't have, it's a country not known for certainly building products, and globally it was known for IT services, but not for building products. So how do you build that capability? People, will be in self-doubt. Can we do it? Is there some magic we don't know? Do you have to be an American to do it? Do you have to be in Silicon Valley to do it? So you have that kind of thinking. And when you demystify that, which takes 10 years, 20 years, when you demystify that in ways that shows you can do it, you empower not just the people and your employees, you empower a whole ecosystem who look at you and say, we have spun off so many companies now that have either come out of Zoho or emulated Zoho. I mean, I was on a call twice last week with VCs and people who are looking to understand and learn something and say, how do you guys do something from where you are, and how do you, etc. So in a sense, the core, getting back to your point, Thomas, the core philosophy of it is to create we started in a place where there wasn't enough opportunity, and there wasn't enough, there's inherent raw ability in people, and you have to transform that multiple times into something that is valuable on a world stage. That is the fundamental goal of the company. Software happens to be the path we took, and business software happens to be the market that we picked, but that is the core of what we do. So in the future, that principle will remain the same. Perhaps it'll go beyond software. Perhaps it'll go into other regions, but the principle is still the same. And now we're taking this to other parts of the world as well, in the context of understanding that these kinds of opportunities have been exclusive or selected in specific regions, or given to people with certain kinds of education, or offered to people with certain kinds of social backgrounds, and so on. And our abilities, if we do it in India for people who are completely underprivileged or non-privileged, why can't we do this in other parts of the world? So that's the tenet of the localism as well. Go to different places, bring with that same principle you carry through. Bring that opportunity locally. Don't go where people are already going. Go into a different place, build that opportunity from scratch, because we know we have done it.
Yeah, one of the few things I remember about learning economics in university was that economics is the study of how limited resources get moved around. But from what I see with Zoho, what you do is you just create more resources.
Yes.
You create more opportunities.
Yes.
Is that what Zohonomics is?
Yes, that's beautifully said. Beautifully said. The core element of economics works with the notion of constraint. Okay, that's a core element of how economics look. So there's
I remembered it right.
Yeah, you do remember right. So there's a notion of, all their beautiful curves work against that, right? So this is demand. Of course, it changes over time, but this is the demand, this is supply, and things like that. So it works with the notion of constraint. Number two, it works, especially as developed in the West, it works under a very strict notions of efficiency. That's a lot of the stuff that American economists did and pushed around the rest of the world was about economics being driven towards efficiency. So from that, efficiency means do everything you can at the lowest price, at the highest value, et cetera, a lot of which turns into policies later that may not stand the test of time. So I'll give you an example of that. Outsourcing is a good example of that. right? So it's an example of efficiency, and if you're efficient, you focus on what you do, let someone else do it. Well, that story has already been written, right? What happened with that? What happened to core competences across the world? Why is it the case that the country that invented Silicon Valley and invented semiconductors does not do any fabs anymore? And it's all done overseas. Why is it the case that, and now you see the reverse of that? You see the new head of Intel who joined a few months ago, who's now saying Intel is going to go back and reinvest in fabs. In a few years ago, it would have thought outsourcing, low value, low skill, push it out, right? So going back to your point, Marshall, so economics kind of brings it puts constraints on these ideas. And I think what we've done, if you were to coin the word Zohonomics here, is to peel out some of those constraints. Don't assume, for example, that your core skills are your core skills. You can develop core skills. You're not cast at a point in time. We were all born with clean slates, right? So you're not cast at a point in time. 10 years ago or 15 years ago, did we know anything about cloud software? How did we get here? Is that a core competency? Absolutely it is. So a few years ago, we started investing in infrastructure, data centers, all of that stuff. At that point, it was a fearful thing to do because there were plenty of people who are already doing this at lower cost. So is that something we should do? Why did we not go with AWS? Why do we not go with one of those companies? That's the obvious thing to do. They've built these thousands of tools on top. When will we ever build those tools? They've doing this at scale. They've been dropping price, which they did every 6 months. They kept dropping price. So why would we not do that? It takes a different bent of mind to say, this is something I need to do because it's painful to do now, but it will be a core competence in 5 years or more. And I will need that core competence in 5 years or more. So that turns around the economic prospect of just how we do this in for that immediate period.
So
what does it
what
take
you
to Ralph?
it is fascinating, and the point is, you tell us that one does not stay stuck with what she is doing now or his thought core competences, but that one can develop into a complete new area, which does not make your company as a future large-scale global farming organization, but it may show that you have a very clear view on sustainability and respect for nature and people, and this, with your other core competences, is becoming a very important, let's say, lighthouse approach you are taking with Zohonomics.
Go ahead.
I do always make a differentiation between efficiency and being effective, such as people drive with high speed against an iceberg, Titanic. It would have been more effective and smarter to go out of harm's way and pass the iceberg and listen to what the man on the radio said, such as telegrams, warning, 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 icebergs. So my first learning since I honestly knew your company only for 2 years, and it was more or less through Thomas' very empathic introduction that I was very curious to learn more about you, because I followed your growing and your path and how you were developing from my perspective. And I was fascinated by this complete new perspective. And having, for instance, in another show, Sridhar telling about his role as a teacher, and that he is so, in German we have the word erdverbunden, grounded. He's not making a fuss about himself. He is very down to earth. And this is an attitude, like you said, we don't have so much titles. We need it for the outside world so that they have a clue what we are doing. But it's still that you can talk and touch everybody. And now making it into a question, because elsewise I get hit by my colleagues. The point is, what would be your key differentiators you see for yourself, and what makes Zoho so different?
Yeah, you had a lot of thoughts in that statement.
Yeah.
I would say,
take your time. There's a
Shame
lot
on
to
me.
take through.
no, actually,
Don't be too efficient in your answer.
Can I request one thing? I realize I have to shift my location. Can I take a minute to do that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
No
so let
problem.
me.
Sure.
Yeah.
We'll just talk about you while you're gone. Oh, that
No,
guy.
we know the bad guys. We are friendly people.
That's the fun stuff about home offices.
Yeah, you have to share your home with the people you live with.
Yeah, we had a strolling bypasser, such as I was wondering from which area Vijay is just corresponding and sending and talking with us. So Vijay will be asked either by one of you or by me. New location.
You can do
New
it
location.
right now.
New environment.
There was a class that was scheduled that I did not know.
Well, home
by the
office, we all need to deal with it.
Yeah.
Before we go back to questions, I have to ask, the door frame, does it have an arch? That's not a flat lintel.
It does have an arch.
That is so cool. I have never seen that in a house. I love that.
Thank you. Yeah.
And you are right where? In the US, in India?
Yeah. I'm based in the US, and I'm based out of California. Most of our operations initially in the US used to be centered in California, and in keeping with these principles of moving into places where we wanted to be where others are not, we decided to move into Texas a long time ago, more than a dozen years ago. And I think now, of course, everybody has got the same idea, and they're moving to a place like Austin. So now what we are doing is we're moving into smaller towns in Texas. So in the last year, we've opened up 3 different offices in Texas in small towns, typically of the order of 20,000 to 80,000 people. So we're hiring people from there. Physically, we're looking for offices. We haven't put them in place yet, but we are already made the plan to hire people from those areas because we were all working remotely anyway. So we started to put that strategy in place. Now, coming back to your point, Ralph, about sustainability, right? Let me take a minute to discuss that. I talked about building out capabilities and assets that you believe could not be built, and then make it happen in different places and use that blueprint in different parts of the world, right? So that's one element of it. The part about sustainability is how can you keep, there's a notion, the word that's used a lot, especially if you're from Silicon Valley, you'll hear the word faddish. A fad is something that's interesting for now. It's everywhere. It's in how, everyone wants to create, it's in even the office culture. It's in the fact that now you can have everybody provides this, all these companies will provide, so they have a gym, they'll have laundry, all those kinds of things. Okay. These are all fads. They're fads of how the office place should look like. There are fads in technology. You see a new technology come in, it'll be some sort of development environment, and all of a sudden all the hot programmers are doing that, and now that's the next hot thing. And there'll be a whole slew of startups that will claim they're going to be successful because they started with a particular technology. Tell me about that, as opposed to the claiming that they're going to be successful because they started with that technology. We've seen this game play again and again. So sustainability is also about recognizing what are fads and what are long-term virtues, right? So a long-term virtue, as an example, is developing people from populations and from regions that other people have been neglecting. That has a sustainable impact because there will always be places that are underdeveloped. There'll always be places that the bigger companies and others will ignore because they tend to follow each other. They tend to pay premium and hire each other's people. They tend to go to the same universities. I was part of that system too. They tend to go and hire from the same top universities. So that is not sustainable because it makes everybody do the same thing. And then all of a sudden you have pockets like Silicon Valley and others where you have an absolute concentration of talent. Everybody's fighting for the same thing. Cost of living has gone up, rents have gone up, and then all of a sudden you find that your next generation of people cannot afford to live there. So
crazy, isn't it?
You can analyze this in a blink of an eye, but it only took 10 years or 20 years for this to happen, not much longer. So in a sense, sustainability is to put yourself in positions where this does not happen. So some of the axioms for us were, do not go into cities. That was one example. So you translate that into rules that you can actually enact against. So one of the rules is, don't go into cities. Why? Because they're already all across the world, India, China, all across the world, they've become congested. In many cases, they're polluted, certainly in the developing world. The quality of life is terrible. People commute an hour to get to work, and the cost of living is going up. And all the malaises that you've already seen in other parts are coming here too. This is true in India, this is true in China, it's true in other parts of the Western world as well. So so what you took is you took the idea of sustainability and you translated that into one principle. The principle is, I'm not going to go into cities. I'm going to go into small towns. And that serves two purposes. I'm helping in not congesting. I'm helping in not polluting. I'm helping in from an environmental perspective. From a people perspective, it supports that too. I'm helping in developing people who otherwise might be overlooked. I'm helping in developing communities because, especially in developing countries, we create 5,000 jobs. That has repercussions for 50,000 people or more because they create the economy, they build it, they buy locally, they invest in local businesses. All of a sudden, your impact on 5,000 is really an impact on 50,000 or 100,000 or even much larger. So that's the second element of that sustainability. Take this, have a view not just of translate it into specific principles. I'm not going to invest in cities. I'm going to invest in people. I'm going to invest in communities, and then give it the time. And then it grows, and then over time you see that you've actually made a difference. So then it validates why you started all this, why you did all this, right? It's not just because you raked up some profit or you got some numbers. There was a meaning to what you did, and it keeps you going for the next 10 years.
Okay, so now there are two points for that. So this it's probably a time to mention the words transnational localism a little later, after the immediate question. So
yeah, we put it in the title. We should probably bring those words out sooner or later.
You say you are moving, which is a good thing. You're moving into cities instead of central cities, so
smaller towns,
preferring the smaller ones. So now the ways in the so-called developed countries, named the US, Germany, well, we are socialized. So I'm a German, so I'm socialized in in the village. There's just nothing, so I can't go there. So I'm a young person right now. I want to have my party. I can't go into a village. So and I can assume that it's fairly similar here in the US as well. So how do you overcome that? I mean, the socialization needs to adapt. Well, it needs to be changed, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, there is a certain amount of group thinking there too, right?
Yeah.
That people think that what young people are looking for is all the same. And what will keep them happy at 25 is what's going to keep them happy at 30, right? And so on. So there is that amount of thinking too. So when you get into, so people are free to live in their cities and do what they want. And ultimately, when you play this movie out, you realize that the place is unaffordable. You realize that you can't buy a house. And at that age, you're probably okay to, have your social events, do this and do that. And then the time comes when people, so what happens? you can't afford to buy a home. So what are some of the social consequences? You delay, perhaps you even delay having children. China is actually trying to combat that now. Now they're saying, it's forget 2, you can have 3. And, and forget the fact that, and they realized that the cities are coming in the way. And they had, China had orchestrated this massive movement of 500 million people from rural areas into urban areas over the last 25 years, right?
Yeah.
Or 35 years. And so now they realize what that has caused. These people are delaying life decisions. The big issue for them is now population growth, all of that other stuff, right? So if you take that larger perspective, then, people are fundamentally connected to communities as well. So when you build people in their local communities and you show them there's a viable reason to be in the community, be respected, be part of developing the community, a lot of people take it up. It's not for everybody, but a lot of people will take it up. We see it in our office in India, where we had a lot of, the office was in Chennai. We had thousands of people in Chennai, and many of them came from hinterlands and so on. And they're happy to be in Chennai. Many are happy to be in Chennai. Many realize that I can actually go back and have the reason I left my place is there was no opportunity. I couldn't have the quality of life that I wanted. And I couldn't, and I had to go send, in some cases, earn money back for my family, right? All those problems are gone now. Because I can go back into the local community. I can still work on a high-paying job. I am connected. I'm with my family or connected with them to the extent I want that and the distance I want to keep. I'm also now have some more meaning outside my job because I can be seen as a developer of that community because I'm hiring, I'm creating opportunities. So there's a larger role and meaning for me than holding a job as an engineer in this company, 1 out of 10 million in Chennai, right? So that's purpose. Right, so it comes back to that too, and then over time, you come back in 5 years. Maybe they've built some social community in that village because many more people now decided it's cool to stay. Right, so you have to observe this over time, and all these changes happen over time. Urbanization also happened over time.
I see it with my kids, so that's why I came from there actually. So we are living here in Samarmish, it's in the Redmond area, so we are probably 70,000 people in this town.
Yeah,
it's not really a city. So in this town, which is flat, widespread, so no high rises here, no nothing. So what my kids tell me, so it's boring. They want into a mega city. They want New York. They want probably Boston is already small. Yeah? So, and how do you educate the people? Because I don't think that my kids are vastly different from most of the other ones.
Well, there's some self-selection that goes on, right? So you can't convince. You're not in the business of convincing everybody. You're in the business of creating meaningful options. So if the option is meaningful to somebody, they'll take it up.
Yeah, but it needs to take some convincing that it is meaningful, because it might change the frame of mind of the people you are talking to. And from my perspective, I wanted big towns as well when I was young. Now I'm perfectly happy with, well, actually I'm not so happy because, well, if I look out of the window that is in front of me, I see the neighbor's house in the distance that I can jump over, which doesn't make me too happy. So I valued the space as well, which is a change of mind. It's a change of the frame, my framing, my personal framing. So now, and this is probably something that you are doing very well as well, by convincing people that it might not be the thing that you want right now, but tomorrow it's the thing that you want.
Yeah, exactly. And look, even in our case, when we moved to Austin, we gave opportunities for people in California to move. Right? And we told them you can, I mean, our goal, of course, is to build local communities locally. That's the goal. So we're not trying to transport people. This is because we were first changing our own office. We had to do that. But now when we build stuff, we're not moving people there. We're building the community from where it is. That's the goal, right? But in this case, we were moving our head office to Austin. So we gave people the option. So several people in their 20s took it up. And they said, okay, we'll do it. And it's a hard decision, right? Many of them are Californians or whatever, right? And California and Texas is like Germany and France, you know? So,
Interesting perspective. especially as I was missing the art of eating in Texas.
Well,
So-
shoot your
And
steak
the good
and put it
wine,
on the
because-
barbecue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, the Californians have the better wines. I will go for that one. But I see your point, and I see that by moving towards Texas, you give with the mindset and with the opportunity in reframing in a positive way oneself, you still gave them the opportunity to stay in some smaller cities in California as you are spreading there
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
But that your approach is on the long run, and you are very focused on, we do not things on a quarterly sense. We are not such crazy. We think in moderate, down-to-earth themes and time cycles. Such as when I come back to the farming example, as a farmer has its cycles when he is getting several plants seeded, you are doing such something in a smart way, such as you build the ground, you prepare, then you go for getting the plants seeded, and then you take a little time. And surprise, it's growing, and you
Yeah.
are successful. So I was still curious. We have worked very nicely on sustainability, setting the mindset in a reframing way of how attractive local places can be and landscape. Now, where is the third key differentiator? What would make people positively triggered, like you became? You left your own business and came to Zoho. What was your motivation?
Yeah, on a personal front, when I did that, like I said, I knew the founders of Zoho for a long time, right? And I have experience in technology and software for a good long time in other areas. So when Sridhar reached out to me, it was very clear that he said, I think we need to grow this company. I need people to come and serve as mentors for this company, help us in some new areas, help us in some new things. And he was very transparent about how he saw things. There was a certain pride in what he was trying to accomplish. And he sold that pride, not what the company is or its market or its technology, like what are we actually trying to do here? So that becomes, so when you've put in 25 years or so into your job, you're looking for something that can be that kind of, there's a certain level of fulfillment that goes with it and a certain amount of meaning that goes with it. And so that appealed to me. So that was the main reason why. Look, it's not without its challenges. We are also a company that has very few, we are loose on processes, we are very flexible, and you have a lot of, that's the nature. So so I look back at it as saying, I have sufficient experience to figure out how to sort through, keep the things that I want to keep and abandon the things that I'm learning for the better, right? And so your experience allows you to do that. I'm not going to just blindly follow this or blindly stick with what I have. I'm going to re-examine some positions I took for the last 25 years and see if I should drop them. And I have. And then there are places I'm going to insert. I'm not going to shortchange my own experience of what I've seen outside of the system. How do I bring that in and mold it into something that maybe can take the benefit of both? So that's what was the appeal to me. So I had a unique place in the organization because I came from the outside, and typically most of the people here have been grown from the inside. And I also knew the people involved. I knew what they were trying to do, and I knew they had a greater purpose than just posting some numbers. So that was the appealing part.
Wow, that's impressive. That's really impressive. So, yeah, Tom.
Go on.
No, for me, it's so fascinating, such as you gave a very clear and honest perspective why you left the good for the better. And that you have a perspective seen that there you can achieve even more than in your own business, together with a team you at that time already knew and liked. And so this is empowering, and making you stronger, and the team is getting stronger by it. So where do you see the perspective if you have been successful for around about 25 years and you did it step by step by step, and you do not have the attitude of leapfrogging? You doing it in a smarter way, my perspective. Yeah, slowly growing is healthy. Fast growth can be like cancer. It will hit you. Yeah, we look in the markets and we look into our friendly competitive environment, and we see a lot of the big ones coming into trouble. Is there a little secret you can share with us why you prefer not to run quarter by quarter, but in a more sensitive way, more empathic way?
You know, it goes back to what this goes back to the evolution of corporate thinking. You know, mostly centered with, I mean, the US was a leader on that, and a lot of it has to do with certain key economists. Milton Friedman comes to mind. You know, where the notion of, there was even a notion of what is the role of a corporation. There's a paper that's been written on this. You know, what is a corporation? What is a company? Right? And what is the role of a corporation? I used to be a strategy consultant many years ago, and when you approach a company, you need something to hang your hat on. You know, what are you going to talk to them on, right? So because there are infinite number of business issues they have. What do you hang it on? So the way the Western capitalistic model of corporations has been tied to, first, a notion of some governing principle. There's a governing principle against which your corporation is run. And that governing principle has been established as shareholders. Your governing principle is to maximize the value of your shareholders. That, in a nutshell, explains a lot of how finance and economics has evolved from the 50s into the 80s into crystallizing what the role of a CEO or a business leader should be. So you could see now you've had people talking a little bit outside of that. You know, there's the Business Council in the US that about 2 years ago, they talked about stakeholders. You know, it would have been anathema for them to talk about that, but they did. They talked about stakeholders and other things. Are they doing much about that? Not yet, but they talked about it. At least it's gotten into the vocabulary. So when you started with that kind of definition, that quickly allowed it moved on its own. So that the way capital was generated was based on that governing objective. The way the company was responsible was based on that governing objective. So all of a sudden that got translated into my shareholder performance is my stock value. And therefore that becomes how I sustain that over time. And how is that monitored? It's done by quarterly meetings. So my goal is therefore to optimize a quarterly meeting. So you can start from this role of a good principle of building capital in a free market. And all of a sudden, it has moved through several steps to how do I get maximized by my earnings per share next quarter, right? So that path has traversed through because several assumptions have been made along the way. So once you get into that, you've lost that broad-mindedness of what this was about. And it has now become a thing of meeting a number and meeting the expectations of the market. The shareholder became this all-powerful market. And then you had influx of capital like we're seeing now, like unknown amounts of capital going to the market, not even knowing how to spend it. So it's going wherever it is. And so the whole market has now resolved itself into following that principle. So coming back to this purpose of Zoho, it is you had to sort of unlearn some of those things. You had to get out of that and say, that is not what we're trying to build. So that was the original decision of saying that we don't want to ever be a public company. because we are going to be governed by those principles. We're going to have to manage by those principles. And you're not going to be able to avoid that fundamental principle of what is the number you put on the table for your shareholders, right? In this case, you would, and in some ways it's ridiculous because you think that by diversifying the shareholders and making public consumers and citizen shareholders, you've actually taken it away from the ownership problem. But it's gone the other way, because what's happened is all that the CEOs would do, they know they're going to be on the seat for 4 years or 5 years, and they don't have to worry about what happens in 10 years or 20 years. So that whole thing of worrying about something that's sustainable, built for the future, has gone out of the door. And it's become, how do I optimize for the short term? So that's a quick summary, I think, of what we've seen happen in the last 25 years. So as a company, we decided early to get out of that. We never wanted to be public because we never want to subscribe to that. Then that opened up a set of freedoms. What is it that we want to optimize for? Is there a governing principle? Should that even be the way of thinking about it? So if you were to put it back in our terms, the governing principle would be to build something sustainable, long-lasting, that creates value locally. That's a lot of things, right? And that execute against that. So if you don't have to meet a number this quarter, so what? It floats on to the next. We don't have to, that's no longer a metric. And that gives you a freedom now to invest in things, invest in capabilities, invest in skills, because many of them are not trying to meet that number. So you've changed your strategy, you've changed your focus, and you've changed how you think. It has gotten from short term to long term. And this is what all, including, American system, people worry and cry about why things are short term, why people don't build in the long term. Why is it that all the silicon companies that invented semiconductors here, not one of them has a fab, and TSMC from Taiwan has whatever 80% of market share. So you worry about all this, and you see why that all happened, right? So there's that long term. You see why the Japanese were very successful in the 80s and the 90s, and despite what's happened with their economy, they still have companies that have stood the test of time, right? So you see that because they've had that certain level of long-termism, and they were not constrained by trying to meet a particular governing principle that should orchestrate everything the company should do. So that's the fundamental difference in how we've approached it. We've had to unlearn that and put in our own principles on what we're going to drive this company to accomplish.
It's the same sort of principles that you have to deal with as an individual, I think. You can be focused on just earning money, going after the job that pays the most. I did that once. I once changed jobs because it had a higher paycheck. That was the biggest mistake I ever made. Now, I think we would all agree that, as people, we have the luxury that we can go for jobs that pay us enough. And we can look at the other aspects of a job. Does it enable us to grow as people? Do we like the work we're doing? Do we like the people we're working with? That, if you write that as a larger case, that is sort of what Zoho is. You operate like a big person.
Yeah, and I put you're totally right. And I'll give you another way of looking at the same thing. We are a capitalist company. We believe in capitalism, but our definition of capital includes many things. It includes people. That's an asset. That's capital that you build. It includes knowledge and know-how that you build. That is capital. That's an asset. So you think of it in the same mindset of it does matter that you build stuff that people will pay for and pay for happily. It does matter. That is part of this model too. So it does matter that you generate healthy revenues and you post and you create the cash flow to fund what you're trying to do as a company. It absolutely does matter. All of that does. But we refine what we think of as capital. Capital is all of this. It's not just the revenue and the assets you built in through the cash flow. It's also the people. It's the intrinsic knowledge in the company. You've got 60 people who really understand how office automation works, right? And they are total experts in the field. Imagine what you can do with them in 10 years, right? That's an asset. How can you put a number to it, right? So that's capital. So we very much have that mindset of building capital, but extending that definition beyond the notion of capital as in what the stock market sees.
Now you have a good bunch, negative word positively meant, a good number of values that you operate upon, that you base upon, that you transmit into the locations that you are at, which are, well, as they are local, which might be very different. So how do you bridge this gap, this possible gap? So they might be thinking totally different.
Yeah, I think it's that notion of what do you hang the company on? You're going, so to qualify the term a little bit, it's transnational and local because we are across multiple nations, but we want to be local in every nation, right? So that's why those two terms have been pulled together. The aspect of being local, as you pointed out, is different. Local by definition means it's different from each other. So what is the tying factor? That comes back to a notion of some values, or you can call it culture, which is an embodiment of values, right? Yeah. So it's a set of values, and it's a culture that preserves those values, not just with you across these regions over time. So the next generation of people have the same values. So in some ways, we look at it as these values are, what is the set of values now, to answer your question, that will permeate across all of these regions. Regions are fundamentally different. People are from different cultures. They even look different. So how do you actually build something that unites us? So that goes back to the universality of values, which we think are human values, values that relate to humanity. So it's about how you treat people. It's about opportunities you create. It's about the empowerment people feel when they come into work. It's the fact that you trust people, that they can do their work themselves, and you don't have all these layers of management trying to figure all of that out. So those are values that are human values that can translate across multiple regions and locations. That's what we try to preserve. And we let the local regions work through the social norms, how people do, so it fits in with what people like to see, but it subscribes to a common set of values that they can all relate to.
How to figure them?
Sorry.
How to figure them? So, I mean, if you are talking to the four of us, we implicitly probably share a lot of values.
Yeah.
And also similarly implicitly have a lot of diverging values.
Yeah.
So how, as a business, to figure those values that we implicitly share, because those are the one you need to build upon.
Got it. A good way is by example. You know, we as a business, you always run into situations. I run into situations almost several times a month, where you have to make a call between, say, some person on your team, and if the employee sees that you stand by them, or you take their position, sometimes it could be an escalation with a customer, right? How are you going to handle that? The customer is going to blame your employee and say, oh, this person was responsible for all of. How do you deal with that? How do you deal with that in front of your employee, not behind them? You know, in front of them. How do you deal with it behind them? How do you deal with that in front of the customer? So you demonstrate that value. You know, I'm going to put you, I value what you do for the company, and I'm going to stand up for you. So people see this repeatedly. COVID was a good example. COVID is a great example of flexibility, not just to employees, but to our small businesses. As you know, we made a lot of our software free for our small businesses. We told them we suspended payments for more than 3 months, and we made it free for a long period more, and so on. We had the same kind of thing with employees. So we looked at people. We had big, you know, as COVID escalated in India, you could see the same thing. The company was there to help people out. You know, it's not just about the money. It's just about, we are on a crisis. We are on a national crisis. You know, a few months ago when things escalated in India, what role can you play? There's somebody from the company who can stand up for you, who can help you negotiate something in hospitals, because hospitals are difficult to come by, right? Who can call in and take care of your family because you're sick, right? That's the kind of example. So when these examples come up, that's how people intuit values. It's not because you put a 10-point charter or it's there on your website or you publish your corporate objectives. It's because of what you actually do. And people watch it and they talk. We don't advocate, we don't advertise. I don't talk in any of our team meetings talking about how good we are. or what we do for people, or vice versa. That gets along because people say Zoho stood up for me, and that kind of thing passes on. And what happens is the next level of people realize that is the value we want to promote, so they start promoting that. If they don't promote that, then it comes back to, when I see a situation like that, I'll step in and say, no, that's the wrong call. That's not what we want to do. In most cases, it doesn't even come to that. People realize this is what the company stands for, and this is what I'm going to do.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you call those values by name? I mean, we titled this session Transnational Localism, but
Yeah.
That's just an example. Do those two words get used around the office? Or if you're talking about some other value that Zoho has, do you call that out by name, or is that just for us outsiders?
No, the values they're not extrinsic, they're intrinsic. So what you see is like the notion that you put people in the middle, and you work with them, is intrinsic. The notion that you trust that people will do their jobs and you don't have to be monitoring them, that's intrinsic. That's not described anyway. This transnational localism came as a phrase because as a company, we decided that we've been trying this thing in India for a long time, building out regions in different regions, smaller towns. And we need to be closer to the customer. The company has got to the size where we need to actually be closer to the customer, develop capabilities, and global trends support that. I mean, privacy laws support that. Language distinctions support that. Spanish people want to be spoken to in Spanish, right? European people don't want their data sitting in any other American server, right? So you've got all of that, right? So the times support you. And we were already set up as a company to be local anyway. So then this became a phrase to mobilize the company and maybe accelerate some of that. And so internally, we use the term mostly localism. And in that context, we look at what should be local and what can actually continue to be run as a company. Obviously, things like culture have to pervade this. So they are across the company, both local and regional. But even me, I'm running the partner team for Zoho. I think of, okay, 2 years from now, what should we be completely doing locally? And what should a local partner team look like? How do they get involved in developing partners, speaking their own language, engaging with the business problems they have, being familiar with the kinds of issues they solve? So it's different from saying, I'm just putting staffing in different countries. That's the older model of globalization, was that I'm going to go global and I'm going to send these guys to run these different divisions, and I'm going to build local and I'm going to run it centrally and have central marketing planning. For us, it's very federated, very decentralized. The only thing we do is, in many of our largest regions, we bring somebody there to lead the region who is a veteran of Zoho, because only then will we be able to establish a culture, because this person now knows the values. They can be that anchor point, he or she, to be able to disseminate the values and to spread them in the company and hire locally. So that's the only thing we do. Otherwise, we bring people in locally, and there isn't a notion of, like I said,
Like
a preamble or something which says these are the values that we subscribe to. That just happens. You watch it in people, and people understand this is what you do. Accessibility to people is one of them. The fact that you don't judge people based on their credentials is one of them. The fact that if a conflict comes between an employee and something else, you're probably going to side with the employee first. So that is one of them. So people just start to learn these things. You don't have to codify it in anybody.
How does that translate to the selection of partners? You running a partner business.
That's a very good point. We can't use that too much as a criteria, because we don't know upfront who people are, but we actually have influence on them, because we have meetings and partners come to our sessions, right? I can tell you at least 2 or 3 partners who have picked up the localism themselves. They have told us that they're not going to be in big cities, and they're going to find smaller towns, because Zoho, you have proved it. You have proved to me that you can build people from smaller towns, attract the talent, and grow them. Again, remember, this is all about patience as well. So I talked about capital. There's notion of capital and there's patient capital. So building people, building capabilities is in the area of patient capital. The quick capital is your turnaround next quarter, right? So you have to build that patient capital, in this case, people capital. So some of our partners have figured that out, and they themselves are doing this. They're moving away from, instead of being in London or wherever it is, going to a smaller place, hiring people locally in their own small way. They're much smaller than us, right? Yeah. So some of these values are rubbing off on people. They send their people to our conferences. So those people mingle with us and they see how there are no boundaries. There's very little hierarchy. Anybody can talk to anybody and bring up issues. So it rubs off. I'm not saying we're going to transform anybody, nor is it our intent to transform everybody, but the values do rub off.
Yeah, but those are stories I would like to hear more of. Every business has case studies of here's a problem that we solved and here's the ROI. I can't name another business that can say, here's a value that we have and here are some partners who realized the value of it and started doing it for themselves. That's every time I talk to Zoho, you guys amaze me with something else. And it makes it so hard for me to be objective because I love what you do.
Let me interrupt for a second because our hour has lapsed. The question is, how much time do you have, Vijay? Because Ralph already indicated he has, well, a long list of topics that
I can spend some more time. Yeah, I can spend some more time.
You just need to give us a heads up when you really need to leave. Yeah.
No, I'm good for some time. I started very early today, so I moved all my meetings before this.
Whenever I start early, it translates into a longer day. Okay, perfect. Ralph.
We had the topic about empathy. We had that you walk your talk, and that customer experience versus employee experience is something you wholeheartedly encourage. Sandy made a very lovely statement where she, and we had it already on the screen.
Can put it back.
Tom, yeah, thanks again, Tom. That Sandy, for instance, like Julie or other people we have more or less often contact to, we always get that Marshall feeling, such as we are always positively surprised and we are in a less objective, more a fan community of Zoho already. And let me ask the perspective, what is the next step in the future? You gave us some little hints in the February what you are planning to drive the business to, but you surprised us positively again by open up Zoho Invoice for free, such as you want to do something for the restarting of economics on a worldwide basis, because Zoho Invoice is not like the bookkeeping challenge, but you open it up for Factura and making, let's say, some stuff easier to get your bills out. Yeah. What are you driving towards? This is a restart initiative. What is coming next?
Yeah. See, in a sense, right, there are two ways to look at the invoicing strategy. The first is we are in the course of, we're just coming out of this crazy times, and it's still unclear how things look like. Even here in the US, it's unclear. In some other countries, it's far less unclear, especially in countries in Latin America. In some countries in Latin America, some countries in Asia, across the world. And so what we have to do is find ways for people to reconnect their businesses. So it's everything. I mean, even personal habits, right? All our employees are now used to working from home. So all of a sudden, they've adapted to that lifestyle. We got to bring them back. So we got to find ways to adjust that, make it easy. And many companies are doing that. Part of it is flexibility, right? Flexibility is the key word. How do you remain flexible? Maybe you give people the ability to go part-time. I mean, come some days in, some days not. Or you allow people in certain jobs, you come in just for that cultural experience or for the ability to share ideas or to see, you know, we all need social contact, right? To do that, especially younger people who don't have families and necessarily. So you create that environment. So you have that flexibility. Now you bring that same flexibility into the customer world. The customer is coming out of a shock too. Maybe they're trying to find their way. So what we did last year was something that was immediate, which is okay. The thing went from here to here, right? So we had to react immediately. So the immediate reaction is, and we did this before figuring out how the market would impact us. We did not even know we would lose money or how badly we would lose. Turns out that last year was a good year for us, and in that we still continued to grow because we made up in Q3 and Q4. But at that time, you had to make a decision, and your decision can't be tentative. If you want to stand against your virtues and your culture, then you make a decision right then. And I know I had this conversation with Sridhar, and one thing he said was most telling to me. He said, "This is why we build reserves. It is for times like this. Why else do I build reserves? It is for times like this. So this is why we have reserves. So now we're going to use the reserves for whatever to secure. So we're not going to let a single person go, which we didn't do. You know, not a single person. We told them before we knew what happened. We told every employee nobody's going to get fired before we knew anything that would happen. And why? Because that principle and clarity. Yeah, the clarity, right? The clarity is this is why I built the reserve. Once you have that clarity, then the action becomes very clear. Why would I let anybody go? You know, this is the whole reason why I built all this up, right? And the second part of it was what we for customers too. So we created this. Communication was a big part of it. So we made all our communication products free at that point in time. We bundled we took a lot of our products, as I mentioned already, you know, made them free for a period of time and allowed people to delay payments, all those kinds of things. Even we did this for our partners as well. Now we're at a stage where we've come back to it's a longer term recovery, right, from where we are. What do we need to do to simplify things? Companies need to get back into business. What's the first thing you need to do in a business is to collect money, you know, so you can stay in business. Invoicing is part of that. So why don't we take something like that and make that free? So that's the thinking behind it. And, you know, it also helps us. The reason why we have free products is that's the way people try our products. That's the way they get an introduction to Zoho. That helps us too, right? So this is maybe a combination of both of those things. It's the right thing to do. Let companies come back and find the easiest way to generate revenues to be able to invoice people quickly. So our communication products are essentially free at certain levels. And if invoicing is completely free, you know how to engage with your customer. And like I mentioned, free products also help us. We're not trying to get, you know, it goes back to the issue of privacy. We don't do free because we want information on the customer. And we're not collecting any information on the customer, even on our free products, because that's not even part of our thinking. It's not part of one of those assets we are trying to build, right? Which is information on our customer. So that doesn't exist. But free is a good way for people to see you, try you out, understand that you're a real player, and test out products and see what they are. And we don't compel free customers that will turn off the switch if you don't start paying. Yeah, they take their time. Again, if you have a long-term view, all of this is possible, right? Does it matter if they change their mind in 6 months or whether they change their mind in 9 months or 12 months? It doesn't matter to us. Change your mind to take on a paying product or a higher value product when you're ready, right? So in some ways, this helps us with there too. It's a way for customers to see they can solve a business problem for me. Starts with invoicing. Maybe this is what else they have. So it's both of those things.
It's a very cool perspective. And talking about, you just mentioned Sridhar Vembu, your founder, again, and we talk about his vision. Now, if we are very curious about where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see your future? And where can you help from a strategic perspective to grow Zoho, and in which direction?
Yeah. It's a good question. It's more on a personal level, and I'll try to answer that the best I can. So the first thing is I subscribe to the common values that Sridhar talks about, right? Otherwise, there's a fundamental incompatibility, right? So that's a necessary condition, as they say in mathematics. It's not sufficient, but it's necessary, right? And so that's one thing. So I subscribe to those fundamental values. So there's no compromising those things. You may change your view on how you want to execute them, or how you want to implement them, or which places you want to implement them. That is the freedom that you need to have as a senior person in the company, that I'm going to take on this or take on that, or work in these areas. So that's the place where I start to exercise my own differences or changes. So the things that I look forward to is, one is that I believe as a company, we, like they say, right, you punch above your weight, right? So we do, as a product company, we are small, but we have large impact on customers. On the other hand, it's the opposite in terms of people's recognition of us. We have so much to offer, but people only see so much of what we do. So that's a big challenge for us. And with my background is working with larger companies. My background is working with companies that are articulating and tailoring processes and methods, right? And we've grown as a smaller company with very few processes, very few formal kind of things, and that's been actually the reason for our success. And what we need to do going forward is retain some of that, but be able to adapt the company into ways that can scale. So that is to do with processes, that is to do with policies, that's to do with things that sound bureaucratic. But if you're an entrepreneur, I've been an entrepreneur several times myself, you know how to combine that. As they say, you don't throw the baby out along with the bathwater. You keep the baby, throw out the bathwater, and then decide how to adapt into this new and changing world. So that's the role I see that I can do. I can play a bigger role in putting in place the scale that we need to go after larger customers. I want the respect of the customers who can respect what Zoho does, but today they don't, because they don't know enough. And we can do that. And if we do that, the sky's the limit, because we have built so many advantages that other people cannot match easily. So that's how I see myself broadly. I'm focused on the US market, but I'm in constant connection with people, with all the leaders across the world. So there's some of that mentorship that goes with that too.
Which is quite a job, considering the Oracles and SAPs and Salesforces, Microsofts that are around there. Well, are they partly a blueprint?
Sorry, are they what?
Are they at least partly a blueprint from how they are behaving in general?
I would say I'm not sure I understood. You mean, do we use them as an example? Is that what you meant?
Well, some of them, obviously they had some success.
Yeah, but usually not. And that's because every company has to carve its own path, right?
Yeah.
And you get some deep intuitions about certain things. Like, for example, they are deeply invested in how they will hire and grow people. We are nothing like that. We are not going to adopt their methodology to do that, right? They are good at articulating, some of those companies are good at articulating a vision for what they're going to provide the customer. That is worth copying. Take an example of a company like, you talked about these big giants, right?
Yeah.
Giants come and go, right? I mean, look where Amazon, who would have thought Amazon would be a technology company, right? And today we accept it. It's already etched in history. But you talked about core competence earlier. We talked about focus earlier. What if they had taken that core competence and focus in 2005 and said, what we're going to do is retail, right? Now they've got the most profitable cloud business anyone has built. They own the market share, and it's a big chunk of their overall profits and so on. So that's a lesson we can take from them. They were not fearful to get into new markets. They're not fearful to build skills for the long term. Bezos had similar approach there, right? So build skills and think of the long term. So you pick the examples that you want to take, and you don't take the ones that you don't want to take, particularly a sales mentality that many of these companies have. We don't want to take. We want to be no pressure sales company. We want to be people. We want people to do business with us and not keep pushing them to spend more. That's not our mindset. So we're not going to take that kind of approach. So that's what I meant, that balance. So I bring some of that experience, and I think of how do I bring that in and fit it into the culture and values that we have here. Goes back to what Sandy was saying. There's some unlearning that happens, and there's some learning that happens, but you put it together and drive it against your own experience and see how you can spread it in the company.
So it's basically looking out and combining the best.
Yeah. But sticking by things, because some things have worked with us for 20 some years, right? For 25 years, certain things have worked. It's almost like what one of the phrases that I heard years ago when I joined was, you run a company based on convictions. You have ideas and you test out these ideas. Ideas become convictions. And the convictions have to be, over time, they get stronger. They get stronger. But so you develop strong convictions. But like we say, you have strong convictions, but loosely held. That means they're strong. But if you see changes, you need to be able to drop it and say, that's something that I can't do anymore. So so convictions can be seen as corporate principles. You have these convictions. My convictions: I'm going to work in smaller cities. I'm going to hire only these kinds of people. Those are my convictions. Some of them you're probably not going to drop because they've been successful for so long. But you keep them in such a way that you build your company on these strong convictions. But you keep them loosely, because if you need to see something has to adapt, how do you change that? Right? How do you adapt to that market? So that's the kind of mindset. For that, you might take some external examples.
Yeah, they're convictions. They're not dogma.
Exactly. Very well put. It's convictions. That's the difference between convictions and dogma.
And I like your statement, the sky is the limit. And I made a quote on my favorite Disney film, Toy Story, Buzz Lightyear, to infinity and beyond, because even the sky is not the limit. Yeah. If you take it in the Zoho approach, I really love that one. Yeah. And I like your positive, smiling enthusiasm, which is so ansteckend. What's the right word?
Contagious, which is probably not a good word right now.
Yeah, we don't like that word.
Well, some things better be contagious, others better not.
Yeah,
but it's so motivating, and that hour raced. Yeah, and
hour and 15 minutes.
Apologies.
Yeah.
This is so fascinating, and being the chief strategist, where is an area you would like to go in the next 12 months?
Oh, no, corporate secrets. Oh.
Yeah. The part that I think we will do, to answer your question, what will the next 20 years or 25 years look like, right?
Yeah.
You started we built this company out of scratch from zero external capital, and we became known for something, the area of business software, right? So, but what underpins that is those convictions and those assets you built. Convictions in terms of principles, assets in terms of people, know-how, knowledge, and the knowledge to build knowledge. It's not just knowledge, the knowledge of how to build knowledge, right? So if you have that, then your domain is not a constraint anymore. You're not saying I have to be in software for the rest of my life, or that's the only thing we can do. Why not move into other areas? And I think Zoho will do that. I think over time we'll start looking at other things. Why not take the same mentality of creating local development, building up communities productively? We know how to do that with software. Why don't we do that with engineering? Why don't we do that with something else? Building some new technologies that may not be software. That's where I think we will go as a company. And some of it starts because we ourselves are vertically integrated and we've built competences in all these areas. So now we can invest in some chip technology. We can invest in database technology. That is still in the tech stack. But I can see it. So that's a natural place to go. You start in software, and because you build all these competences, you can start investigating and going horizontal in parts of the tech stack. Over time, I don't see us even constrained by the tech stack. Why, if these are universal skills, being able to build, develop people and run efficient small teams and grow companies is something you can do in multiple areas. And we can do that in unrelated fields. And so that's how we see things. Maybe it's in energy, maybe it's in newer technologies. So that's how I see where we'll go.
Marvelous.
Energy would be quite an interesting one, as you're doing that anyways, right?
Small experiments now.
Well, but that's the way.
Experimenting
about
the farmer
it,
approach.
So that's I was looking at that, thinking, interesting idea. So you're being self-sufficient in your well, the Austin camper, call it campus, lacking a better word, or farm. So you're being self-sufficient there. Why not making a business model out of it?
Yes, exactly. And these small things lead out into, again, an area of competence, right? Most of our competence has been built by solving problems for ourselves. Why did we even have financial software? Because we didn't want to pay somebody for accounting software. So translate that to 10 years and all of a sudden you know how to build general ledger software, right? So similarly, you solve your own energy problem, you solve your own food problem or whatever it is, and all of a sudden you are that core competence was not etched on your forehead. You built it over time, right? And so that's the new core competence, right? So that's what happens.
Which makes it a perfect closing word, right? So you find your core competences by developing them, actually, by needing them.
Exactly right.
Which is, well...
The core competence is looking at the rearview mirror. When you're looking front, there isn't anything. You've got to build it.
But what is encouraging us as a gang here from our side is you love to go for the front mirror. For the windscreen.
You don't need a mirror in front.
You look forward. You are not looking into the back mirror or the inside mirror. That's not so fascinating. It's just good to know that the road is clear. But you love to go forward in a sensitive and smart way.
Okay, from my point of view, many thanks for your time, especially the extra time. Highly appreciated and well, very informative as well. So that's
thank you all for taking the time. Pleasure talking to you. We're all smiling all the time, so how can it not be fun? and
always
I know you're an admirer, be a critic as well. That's how we will improve.
Right. Well, we are critics too, and sometimes more forceful than needed. Because if you're too forceful, you're not heard, right?
It's coming from the right place. When you have your well-wishers criticize you, that's what you need.
So it's also the way of transporting it is also important as well. So
exactly.
This is one of my weaknesses, the transportation layer. To put it into the internet protocol. Okay. So again, many thanks to you and whoever is still online. So I hope it's not only Zoho people who are still watching us. So it's far too valuable for that. So with that, let me just end the broadcast.